find a church with leadership you can trust. I had a guy come over 3-4 years ago at my house, and he was, what do I do? What church do I said, it's real simple, man. I named the Bible churches in the area. I said, within 8 miles, this is your options. This one, this one, this one, this one. I said, just go think about the leaders, go look on the staff page, go to the church, and then just decide where do you want to submit yourself into your family for the next decade. That's it. Just pick one. And then what you do is you submit yourself to that leadership, and you just do whatever they say. That's what humility is. And then you trust that God's not going to waste you. The captain of the army is not blind. So if you trust the leadership of the church, then you can trust his work through the leadership of the church.
I want to hear your true story.
No, true story. Like I just got off a phone call with a guy who was, his excuse for, this is a pastor of a megachurch who's raising his voice to another pastor, and his excuse was because I'm an Enneagram 7 or 8, he said, which means that I will be your friend until I'm not. And then I raise my voice and I'm allowed to. And the other pastor responded and said, but doesn't the Bible talk about the fruits of the Spirit? And he said, I'm an Enneagram 7. That's a true story. You talk about, so let's talk about leadership development.
I think that's a great segue.
Let's
I think
do
you
that.
just did it. So your leadership philosophy at our church is not based on an Enneagram number.
No.
Okay. Which is the preferred number? I don't know the number system.
Hey, listen, I don't.
We hire 10s. That's all I know. Level 10 leaders.
I don't know anything.
I don't know if
about
that's a bad
it.
thing. Sorry, I
don't know anything
Enneagram
about
levels.
it. I just don't think I would ever use it as an excuse for disobeying the word of God.
All right, so let's use that to jump off. What is your ministry leader philosophy here at Mission Bible Church?
So character, number one. We always talk about character. Then I would put chemistry. I want to be unified in the bonds of peace with a group of guys. I want to know that I'm running. Like, I love that on our team, all of these guys, like these are my best friends. I understand some guys are like, hey, let's do corporate ministry with people that maybe don't always get along with. I don't want to do that. And then competency, right? So I want to make sure that we're going in that order when we raise up leaders for the next generation. Character, chemistry, competency. Faithful men who are able to wield the sword.
So you take 2 Timothy 2:2 and the Disneyland test.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you expand on the Disneyland test? That's what you told me. You mentioned in our conversation.
The Disneyland test is not the litmus, and I would now use Knott's Berry Farm instead because I don't like Disney.
Amen.
But I would say if you have a dude that you are willing to spend the day at an amusement park with.
One of the worst places to go.
Worst thing.
Yep.
Sweaty, hot, long lines.
Yep. Expensive food.
And you're like, you know what? I would do it with that guy and I'd have fun. That's a great test.
Ooh, that's a good test of chemistry.
It's a great test.
All right, but
I'm still not sure if I would go with you.
To anywhere or Disneyland?
I don't know, coffee.
Good. Well, let's move.
Let's take the Enneagram and see how we align.
So moving from 2 Timothy 2:2, what other passages would you bring in as far as your assessment of leaders?
Well, I mean, character, you got your qualifications in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus. So that's going to be your backbone of your spine. And then you get into chemistry. I think you got it so much in the Bible that's based on unity. I always think about like a yoke with 2 oxen in it. And this idea of like, I mean, if you don't like the dude next to you, that's not going to be a real fun field to plow. You might get it done, but it's not going to be enjoyable. And then competency. I think you could argue when it comes to competency that Matthew 25 is going to have 2 5, 10 talent guys. And you want to be thoughtful that the guys that you're rolling with are capable to reproduce. So I think you could argue a few texts, but more than anything, it comes back to just, are they able to wield the sword? Do they know God? Do they know his word? And are they able to communicate his word? And then are they able to lead people?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? And if you're a leader, right, what do you call a leader with no followers?
Oh, crazy man or a dude alone on a walk. Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah.
But talk about that element a little bit. What does it mean to lead people in the church or in general?
In general, just here to there. So here's where we are, and the strategic ability or tactical ability to assess. Here's where we actually are, and then here's where we need to be. So here's A, here's B, and then here's how we're going to get there, the mile markers to get there. That's leadership. I think spiritual leadership is interesting because you're trying to assess corporately, what's the heart condition of the sheep? How are my sheep actually doing? And sometimes you'll have a few stragglers. Other times you have sheep that are running really well, eating really well, doing really well, look healthy. But you have to know the condition of the flock. And then you got to be able to decide, okay, now how do we get somewhere? And so leadership is really the movement of people. Shepherding, we've talked about it before, is feeding, leading, and protecting.
Do you think you can make, not you, but do you think do you think anyone can be made a leader?
No, I don't think so. I think you can improve. We all can improve our leadership abilities, but Romans 12 seems to preclude that leadership is a gift. And
Where are you going in Romans 12 there?
Well, he who has leadership.
That's a gift given. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and then, so leaders are born. I think there's a natural talent. And then when we're saved, we're converted, leaders are gifted. That's something that they are given by the Lord. That's a gift. And so, Marcus Buckingham has a whole book, maximize your strengths. If you spend your whole life mitigating your weaknesses, then you're basically moderate.
Right. Congrats. You made it average.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if you have a 5, 6, 7 leadership gift and you press into that, now you can hit that thing 8 or 9. Now you're running. And so that's why spiritual gift assessments can be helpful. Being in a good church where people are helping you figure out who you are can be helpful, so that you don't spend too much of your life running in a direction that you're probably not going to be super successful in. And then conversely and prayerfully, those guys who are gifted in leadership find a beautiful incubator to be able to learn how to do that well, and then they thrive.
And that's then part of our job at the church is to provide that incubator so that they can grow and thrive.
Yeah, I'd almost say it's a dereliction of duty to not. The idea is equipping saints for the work of service. And so everything about ministry is a reproduction. Make disciples who make disciples.
What would, let's do a contrasting picture here. What would a church look like that has no incubator? Guy comes with talent, with giftedness to lead, and there's no opportunity. Like, is that a real thing?
Oh, I'm sure it is. I don't know that I could say what that is, though, what a church is like.
But that would look like no opportunity, no upward mobility, no ability to take the word and minister to people, which even that, I wonder if that's even a real scenario, right? That should be happening among congregants in a church all the time. They're to be filled with the word and to be ministering to one another, right? So that leadership should just be manifesting.
Yeah, it's all
naturally.
hypothetical.
Yeah.
The forum I can think of would be a church where there's one guy who gets up as the holy man and he speaks on Sundays, and then a church of congregants expects him to do all the work throughout the week. So I want you to go study, then I want you to visit the hospital, I want you to build us some small groups, I want you to do our funerals and weddings, and then we'll come in and we'll just eat off of your hard work.
Yeah, and that's completely antithetical to Ephesians 4, that he's supposed to be equipping the saints for the work of ministry. In that scenario, he's doing all the work of ministry.
Yep.
Okay.
I think a healthy church will always have a reproductive element to it, similar to a healthy body, similar to a healthy family. There's something about God's people that procreate.
So what does that look like here? Let's go big picture. Philosophically, what does it look like here at Mission, the raising up of leaders?
I think you would know that better than me, but I think big picture, tell me where I'm right or wrong, but I think big picture, we would always say, faithful and little. I mean, start off with, hey, come to the church, and then there's going to be membership, and then be a faithful member. And then be a faithful discipleship group leader, be a faithful servant on a team, join the internship and become, be faithful. I've always said that, kind of like Spurgeon, he alluded to the fact that like bees to a flower, if a leader's a leader, there will be people around that are following regardless of the title. So I think a lot of times we take influence and title and we think they go together. They don't. Really, influence is who you are. And so whatever pocket of life you're in, if you're a leader, there will be a group of people who naturally begin to follow, and hopefully for the right reasons and toward the right direction. And then what we do is we want to attach title to that when the time is right. But a lot of times I think in church we go, well, we'll just give them a title. Now they're a leader, but that's not necessarily true. And so I think just get into the organic life cycle of a healthy church. And, God has a time to a man and a man to a time. He's not going to waste a pulpit. And you'll be able to see how you matriculate into a position or a post of leadership.
But that's even earlier in Ephesians 4 where it talks about specific leaders, but I think we would apply this in general with the Holy Spirit gifting people, that those are gifts, those people, individuals are gifts to the church. And then the church, we respond, we affirm people.
Amen.
But you don't, calling someone an elder doesn't now make them elderly and now qualified. It's that they already were exhibiting all these.
Or calling yourself an elder or calling yourself a pastor. How many times have we had people, we come to our church and they walk up and they introduce themselves and they're like, hi, I'm Pastor so-and-so. I'm like, pastor of what? So because you felt called at some point, or maybe even had a post in ministry 30 years ago, you still carry the title as a self-appointed herald of ambassador of God. It's almost like a roaming apostle. So I think we got to be really, really thoughtful. Just remember the local church is the one that confirms and commissions.
Yeah, I run into that now and then where someone will come up and express they have a deep desire. Usually they say, hey, I'm called to ministry, which is wonderful that you have that desire, right? 1 Timothy 3. But then the first question you talked about, we have an environment here to foster that. And the first question is, oh, great. Like, how come you're not a member yet? And I think what often happens is from that conversation, you see, oh no, they're testing out the church to find out, am I going to get the job I want? Or do I have to actually join membership, commit to years, and then find out I'm not the guy?
Yeah. The worst thing, not the worst, immorality is the worst, but one of the ways a young man can stunt his development in ministry is to keep bouncing around like an entrepreneurial spirit until he finds a place that he thinks he can actually get what he wants. What guys don't understand is that every time you bounce churches because they don't quite give you what you think you deserve, you've just pushed yourself back 3 to 5 years in your timeline. And you can only do that a couple times until you're 35 and it's too late. So it's like guys come up to me and they haven't thought through, I think, the strategic chess reality of their life. And they'll say things like, yeah, I'm called and whatever. Then they'll bounce around, be gone for 2 years, come back, and they're still. I mean, I had one guy, I'll give you 2 examples. Phone calls the last month or so. One guy was doing interviews for a local seminary and wanted to come down and interview. And so I answered a few questions. Then we shot off on the church planting discussion. And before I know it, I'm kind of counseling. I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because he says, no, I'm called to ministry. I went to this school. I've got an MDiv and dropping $90,000 on it. And this brother wants me to help plant a church. But then he's telling me, he's not even 100% doctrinally aligned with the guy. He's not sure the relationship's intact. And so I asked him, I said, no, how old are you now? He's like 30. I said, how much did you just drop on a degree? $90,000, and how old are your kids now? Well, one, another one on the way. I said, so you understand, in California, there's a 75% failure rate on church planting. You've already said you're not doctrinally and methodologically aligned with said planter. And you've just dropped $90,000 on a degree. You understand the likelihood of this failing is really, really high. And even if it works, you're not going to be able to pay back your loan. And you're 10 years before you're going to be 40 years old if you have to restart. Yeah. So I don't know that guys have thought through the realities of their passion. And then on the flip side, another guy a couple of days later called from a church in the Inland Empire, and he's 22, is realizing he's not aligned with his local church that he's on staff on. His wife, I think, is understanding they're not aligned. So it's easier to talk to him and go, hey, if you walk the plank now and you restart at a church that you trust and you go to seminary at 22 years old, you have time.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of guys waste that front decade of their life bouncing around as opposed to simply locking in and realizing that the life they can have at 30, 40, and 50 would be a ton better if they would simply be humble and learn in their early years.
Yeah, and I think the first element we talked about was character, and so much of it gets exposed when you talk to someone about that desire that they have for leadership, or specifically pastoral ministry, and then how they carry it out, right? 1 Timothy 3:1, if any man aspires, so we go, that's good. You don't want to pretend like you don't, like fake humility, like, oh, if you guys want, like, no, I desire that. But then you look at Titus 1, don't be a self-willed man.
And aspires for the work. The ergon. I think sometimes we go aspire, and they have a dream that they've built up in their mind.
Aspire for position.
Yeah, title, position, influence, pulpit. But there's a work to shepherding that you are aspiring for. And then comes that qualification assessment, right? And you want to have a group of men. I've always said this. You might feel it on the inside. Great internal call, wonderful. You need a group of men, this is Al Martin in pastoral theology, who have said, yes, this is you. It is confirmed from the outside. The reason being, when things get hard, that's what you're going to fall back on.
I think we see that Paul with Timothy, right? Hey, remember when the presbytery laid their hands on you? That's encouraging.
Yep.
Yeah. So you take that, if any man aspires for the work of ministry, and we're already discussing, you should be just as a faithful member in a church doing work of ministry in some way. And that will expose those leadership qualities. You have people following, growing. I think that's important too. You have people that are around you, not just like you, but are actually growing in their spirituality and their walk with Christ. How do you then foster the environment in such a way that they're staying aligned with the church and that it doesn't create a schism in any way?
Well, I think leadership alignment is always important to have top down or bottom up, however you want to view it. I don't think you ever want to have any part of your church that isn't running in the same direction. And so as you develop leaders, there's two big things that I can think of, and I'm sure there's more. I can think of other guys, other buddies who have churches, and they're like, value systems and all that. But I think for me, it would be number one, doctrinal alignment. The faintest ink is better than the best memory. You and I work often on that 25-page document, like what's in, what's out, making sure that our entire team is exposed to what we believe is sound doctrine across the board. Yeah. And not to say there's nuances that we won't disagree on. But I think by and large, if you have a document where everyone goes, yeah, that's who we are, that prevents from a ton of potential infighting. Because so many of the phone calls that I get start with a staffer on a church, a staff pastor, who goes, hey, our church isn't entirely aligned on said doctrine. And we all agree we should get along and we should be unified, but I'm really struggling what to do in my sub-ministry, like a youth pastor, because my senior pastor, or sometimes the senior pastor, hey, I've got guys on my team, we're not elders. So I think doctrine is critical. Another element, though, is as people come up in leadership and for us into an internship and potentially elders or deacons, is going to be time. Truth and time go hand in hand. And if you can slow down the process, because there's really only two ways to develop leadership in your church. You can hire from the outside, and that's like, Yankees or, the Lakers, bring in Luka, and you can spend a lot of money and bring in a free agent. And then you have a challenge of enculturation, because you got this new personality and every conversation turns into two, because it's like, hey, here's what we decided. Then they circle back around and go, well, why do we do it that way? Mm-hmm. So there's an emotional quotient involved. It takes time. The other way to do it is to raise from the inside. Now the problem with that is it's slower.
Right, you're front loading the
You
time.
are. You got to bring in talent, but then you got a lot of back end challenges.
Yeah.
Or you can slow down and raise from the inside, so you have DNA that all believes the same, but it takes a lot more time for the church. And so those are the challenges involved. But I think if you're willing to go slow, the reason time is so critical is because it allows a season for dialectics. And I don't want to use big words for the sake of big words, but we learn most about each other and about what we truly believe in seasons where we're conversating. And you think about it, your frameworks are developed in seminary or when you're studying, and then you get with a buddy and you present your thesis, and then he presents an antithesis, and then you guys synthesize. Why do we agree with? That's actually what this whole podcast is. It's you and me doing what we do. But I think it's interesting that when you get guys in a room for 2-3 years, internship, you get different views. Over time, that synthesis begins to happen. And that's why, for us, I'm working with my best friends. You guys are all my best friends. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. I never once come into this office and don't want to be here. In fact, if I wasn't here, I'd be sad. Because everyone gets along. Everyone knows why we believe what we believe. We've all worked through those things over the course of many years. All the interns who come up, half of our staff, half of our eldership have all been interns. Yep. So it's a slower process. But going back to the joke about Disneyland, every single person in our church leadership, I'd love to spend the day at Disneyland with. And so I think that's what's important: doctrine, and then time, if you want to have alignment.
How do you take us into your mind, your heart a little bit there when you're raising up leaders? Just really you personally, when you're raising up leaders, how do you keep yourself from being nervous that the person you raise up might be better than you?
No, they should be. I want them to be. I think a lot of guys say that. I don't know that a lot of guys really enjoy that
when they raise up someone better than them.
Right.
Now they're in their shadow.
Yeah. I mean, and we've had all types and shapes and sizes. We've had guys who've come up who are at small churches, guys who've left for medium churches, guys in big churches, guys with global ministries. I think what happens is the flesh likes the idea of guys coming up, like raising and releasing and going out and doing something equally as good. I think where the flesh, what the flesh doesn't like is when we truly raise up guys who do something better than or different than. And what we have to get okay with if we're truly going to be a Paul, and tell the church at Corinth it's not about Apollos and who waters, new plants and who grows, is we have to be willing to go, hey, listen, guys are going to grow and bloom, and they're going to do things better and different from what we do. And that doesn't change what we do. It doesn't change our convictions. I was thinking about it like this with my son, all my kids, they're in those teenage college years, and as they grow, they're developing different views than I have. And, my children are smarter than me. They're better trained than me, educated than me. And so there's a lot of times they'll say things and they'll want to do things different from me. I think the worst thing that a father can do when your kids are working out that dialectic season of their life is suddenly grow insecure and be like, well, maybe, we were wrong and your mom and I should change. You talk about bringing insecurity, if not contempt, into the heart of your child. If every time my son has a new view that's different from mine, I go, well, maybe we'll have to change. That's going to breed insecurity in him. Yep. And so I think part of being a father figure and a grandfather for sure is the ability, and this is true for ministry, to say, hey, listen, I applaud guys who go out and do bigger and better and different things, but it in no way changes or impacts my convictions about what I do. And so I think that's probably the most important thing for guys that raise and release well. I'm not saying that I've done that. I'm just saying I think it's an important part of it.
Yeah, and that requires that you're kingdom-minded, that you remember, hey, I'm just an under-shepherd. Christ is the head of the church, right? Yeah. And so you're fighting a different battlefront over there against the same kingdom of darkness. I want you to succeed, right?
Well, that'd be the goal, right? At the end of the day, there's one person that gets all the glory. So we're all going to be kneeling before the same captain, and we all took our flank on the army, in the battle line and fought where we fought. But to think that I don't want to cheer somebody else who is a part of my family and a soldier in the same army, it's so antithetical. I mean, James says that's demonic. It's demonic.
What does that even tell about you? Like, I want to be the best warrior here, and I actually don't want you to do well over there. Like, we're fighting the same enemy.
Yeah, and so that's why I rejoice. In the affirmative, that's why I rejoice that, so many men have come out of this church and are doing great things. And there were times that we've had issues, and struggles and had to work things out. We've had interns that were upset with me. We've had staff pastors who, we disagreed. But by and large, I look now at the guys who've come out, and 80, 90% of them are just absolutely instrumental in changing their communities for the glory of God. So it's really exciting.
Going back to just the development of leaders, what are some of the big hurdles you've encountered?
If there's somebody, we can talk about this. Number one would just be humility. Like, there's no way to succeed in ministry without humility. And that's just the way it is. We have to be like Jesus, Philippians chapter 2. You'll fail immediately. But I think there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. Some of the obvious ones that pop to mind are like, age can be tough. Like if a guy gets into a system and he's a little older, that can be tough. And the reason for that, I think, is because a lot of our convictions begin to cement in our 30s. And so if you find a guy who's in his 20s, he's pretty moldable. Yep. But by 30, 35, certainly 40, it's hard. Brian's funny. One of the guys on staff here, he's asked me before, he's like, I came and I was 40 years old. Why me? Why'd you all let me in? And I always tell him, because you're so humble. Yeah. But like you came in and you're wanting to wear a suit and you're dogmatic and, all these things. But like every single time that I would say, hey, why don't we try this? Maybe you can grow in this area. Yes, sir. No problem. No, sir. So even if you're older, humility still can win the day, but that's more rare. I think distance can be a problem when guys are far from a church, like geographically. We have interns and guys who come and they get involved and then suddenly they want to buy a house and they move away. It kind of breaks my heart because I'm like, if you love this thing so much, why would you want to move away from it? And not to say that people don't need to own homes, and that's fine. But when a person isn't close to the community that they're trying to serve, it gets hard.
Yeah.
It just does. I think martyr syndrome can be a big one. I've seen that. There seems to be two operating principles for leaders. Some guys are always a little bit ahead of the curve, and that's with life. They kind of strategically plan things. Even when there's a lot on their plate, they know what to say yes to, what to say no to. They never look overwhelmed. And then there seems to be some guys operating always a little behind. They show up a little late to meetings. They're always a little surprised by insult or, people pushback. And it develops a martyr syndrome, kind of a woe is me thing. That can be a little bit of a holdup. I think cage stage.
What's the root of that martyr syndrome?
I don't know the heart issue. I almost would hate to put it over into a sin category, because I think it's more of a prudence thing.
Is that lack of planning?
I used to think it was.
Is it perspective? Hey, I'm fighting uphill?
I used to think it was. I think more and more now it's just an operating principle. From a very young age, some people they don't have the ability to see time as something they run. They see time as something that runs them. And that's what I mean. It's almost hard to get that to change. I think cage stage is tough. Like the idea of, listen, I'm PTSDing from my attractional megachurch, and we need to basically sing a cappella music, wear a suit and tie, and if we do anything else, the problem with that is it becomes so methodologically dogmatic that unless a guy quickly grows out of that, it's hard to have relationship. And so that's another one that comes to mind, but I could go on and on. There's always limiters.
What do you say to the person who's humble, and maybe too humble, where they're unworthy, it's like a refusal to take an opportunity because no, I'm not good enough for it?
That's the pastoral element of shepherding, where I'm trying to get into someone's, not their head, but their heart, and go when you have an opportunity to change the world, even if you go, that's a small way, man, it's one discipleship group or teaching a class. But if you have the opportunity where people in your life have said, we see this in you, and you say no. And one of the things I've seen over the course of my ministry now over the years is people that say no don't often get a second or third chance. It's almost like it's a snowball that rolls downhill, like the parable of the talents almost, where that reproduction grows on itself. And I think if you find that you're always kind of reticent to step into things, don't be surprised if at some point, the requests stop coming. And I had a buddy.
You squandered the opportunities.
I've had buddies who've done that. And I had one guy, it got really concerning because he kept saying, I don't feel qualified and I don't, da-da-da. And eventually I just said, what is the deal? Everything about you is qualified. So either you're in the wrong place, the wrong position, or you're, we got to get something squared away in your heart, because you need to take the step of faith. So
you talked before about you can bring it from the outside, then your work is in the future, or you can raise up from within and your work's right here.
Yeah.
Where does your perspective as far as long-term perspective and patience play in there as far as leadership development? Is it more than that, or is it simply the resolve to, if at all possible, raise from within?
I think most guys would say they want to raise from within. I think most guys would also say that the current demands of ministry don't allow them to. So I've got buddies. I can think of one guy right now who's just landed in Louisiana, and he's already trying to figure out what to do. I had another buddy in Tennessee. The moment he landed there, it was like, what do I do? And both of those guys are 100% saying, I want to raise from within. That's what the church does. Both guys are having to hire from without and saying, hey, do you know anybody?
Yep.
Because the ministry has a demand of, and another guy in Arizona right now, it's just, so I think a lot of times you have to put the Band-Aid of an external hire for 2 years while you build your system, because raising up from the inside requires structure.
Yeah, the other one, and you just talk about how, you have a pretty good sense if you have worked with years with an intern who's moved up, it was a D group leader, now an intern, then on staff in some partial way, then an assistant, then comes in as, on staff on pastor. You have a pretty good idea who this guy is.
Oh, yeah.
When it's an interview and maybe a couple of rounds of preaching, it's a flyer.
It totally is. The farm system's great. We're almost at the point now, it's been 15 years, but Every single person, by the time they're in the room with us, has been so vetted that they're like a best friend.
Yep.
But there was no way that I could have done that in church planting season. There's just no way.
Well,
I needed help.
From the congregation perspective, when we say, hey, this is so-and-so, we're going to have an elder council, the constant feedback is, well, finally, well, duh, that makes sense. And that's what you want. You don't want these guys going, who is this? Where did he come from? What's his name? Does he know any of us?
Yeah.
Does he fit our culture? Does he like our culture? I mean, so much more.
Praise God, a lot of these stories have worked out really well. But that was some of the biggest challenges in the early years, where we'd have guys who we had to get them in. We knew there were some doctrinal differences. We all loved each other, but we were just not aligned. And so then we would get them in. They'd start helping out in the church. Now they've got a big following, and then we find, and they're like, I can't do this, man, in good conscience. I don't believe this. I believe this. And praise God, we're all friends now, and they're doing great things in their churches. But those are the challenges that come with the early years.
All right, so you're listening to this. Someone's listening to this, and they feel called. That's what they tell themselves. They tell their wife. They know they are called. What's your counsel to them?
Find a church with leadership you can trust. I had a guy come over 3-4 years ago at my house, and he was, what do I do? What church do I? I said, it's real simple, man. I named the Bible churches in the area. I said, within 8 miles, this is your options. This one, this one, this one, this one. I said, just go think about the leaders. Go look on the staff page. Go to the church. And then just decide, where do you want to submit yourself into your family for the next decade? That's it. Just pick one. And then what you do is you submit yourself to that leadership, and you just do whatever they say. That's what humility is. And then you trust that God's not going to waste you. The captain of the army is not blind. So if you trust the leadership of the church, then you can trust his work through the leadership of the church. That's the whole point of Al Martin's pastoral theology, which if anyone is in that position, what you do is you go buy that 3-volume set. Just take the first volume and read it, and read it, and read it, and read it, and read it with a pencil, and highlight it, and mark it, mark it, and mark it, and you pray. Because what Martin did was he took the best of the last 200 years of Reformed theology as it relates to the pastorate, from Spurgeon to Charles Bridges and all of it. He puts it all in one volume. And by the time you're done with that book, not only do you understand who you are and whether you might be called or not, but also how you're to interface with your local church. And then you go to your shepherds and you say, hey, I've read this volume from Al Martin, and I just want you to know what I'm thinking. Would you be willing to take the next 3 years and assess my life, my character, and my doctrine, and let me know if, in fact, you see what I'm sensing? And I guarantee 3 years from this date, the date that you start that journey, you will have answers. They may not be the answer you like, but they will be the answer that is right.
That's really good. Yeah, and I think a big part of that is even your language. It's not coming to the leaders going and saying, hey, I know I'm called, and so what do you need for me to get what I want? And you wouldn't word it that explicit, but the front half you would. Hey, I know I'm called, so what do I do here to operate in the system so that I can become a pastor? Mm-hmm. I mean, I get that. Most membership classes, someone will come up. How do I become a pastor here? Well, become a member, step one. And so just moving from that language of a mystical call where I know that I'm meant to be something and move it over to, no, I aspire, I desire. And now I submit to you.
I have no problem with the mystical internal reality. I walked out of my pastor's office the week that I was converted and knew deep down inside something had changed. And I would do anything I could in my life to preach the gospel.
Yep.
Also, I had a group of elders who said, hey, we have a Tuesday night study. Would you like to teach it? And it grew. And the group of elders said, we'd like for you to be a pastor here. And a group of elders said, we would like to ordain you. And a group of elders said, we'd like for you to consider planting a church. One has to happen if you want to feel the thrill and the inspiration of being in ministry. The other one has to happen if you want to have the lifetime confirmation that you are to be in ministry.
Yeah, you're not just running off of your own feeling.
Yep.
That's good. Any final words of encouragement to anyone? Let's say the person that just is not desiring the pastorate, but just wants to be a faithful leader in whatever subsection of the church that they're at.
Humility.
I think that's the thread through all of this.
That's life. That's the thread. That's the thread of life and eternity if you want to be like Jesus.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Christianly. If you, unlike Tony over there, were thoroughly engaged and enjoyed the episode, please leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe, share it with a friend.